This episode is not sponsored, but we encourage you to help support the small businesses, charities, and organisations that we mention.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Our Circle. I'm Jess.
I'm Rhiannon.
And today we are talking about being single versus being in a relationship. And I think we thought this subject would be quite interesting because we both are different. One of us is single and one of us is in a relationship. So it's kind of interesting to compare our experiences and I guess what the perks are versus what isn't so good.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty much spot on.
Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to start off by talking about how happy are the majority of people in relationships, do you think? I read a stat that basically said, and I think a lot of people know this one, that 50% of marriages nowadays seem to end in separation
That's
or divorce.
mad.
I know, that's ridiculously high. And I feel like if you go into a relationship or a marriage knowing that stat, like, don't you think that's really disheartening? Like just going into something with that kind of, okay, I mean, you'd think actually, no, to be fair, like you'd probably think, right, it's either gonna work or it's gonna fail. So I guess that does kind of make sense, 50-50. But do you know what I mean? Like hearing like divorce rates are that high, kind of you think, okay, it's very common, like this, it's very real that this could not work out. You know what I mean? You don't have those rose tinted glasses on.
In my head, I'm sort of like, well, what made it different to years before? And I wonder if it's because of literally how things have evolved over time. Like currently the internet, for example, and the amount of things we have access to. So one, just being able to communicate with other people, being able to consume different media and stuff that people probably wouldn't have previously had. So maybe it's like they were, I don't want to say, oh, they settled and didn't know any better or didn't know that they had other options, but do you know what I mean? Like, as in, maybe people were just like, we found like our person and that's it. I won't look anywhere else because I found the person and that's that. Like they didn't think any more than that. Whereas I think now people are very skeptical. Like, is this the one? Like, no, I should still keep looking. Like, oh, they're still not ticking boxes and stuff. I'll keep looking, sort of thing. And it's, I don't know.
See, I'm inclined to think a bit more cynically, as always.
Okay.
And I'm inclined to think that it's always been that people have been unhappy, but in the past they've just stuck to it because
like
people like frowned upon a divorce, or like women couldn't have as much of a say in leaving a relationship.
Sure, because like they couldn't work, so they wouldn't be able to support themselves. Sure.
Yeah, so I think it's probably a mixture of the two. But then I guess being happy in a marriage is a bit different to being happy dating in terms of
True, you're right.
being able to leave. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I suppose so, and or even maybe not necessarily just marriages. Like some people aren't married, but they may as well be, sort of thing, like with the way that they're committed to each other.
Yeah.
So sometimes I suppose we've mentioned this in our first season about how we have a bit of misunderstanding almost about what marriage actually means, because some people, like the stat shows, don't really take it that seriously, I guess. And I guess, like we've said, if they know that they are able to get out of a marriage easily or easier now, that stat kind of makes sense. It's just really sad, I think.
Yeah, I think I learned recently that the laws of divorce have changed recently. I think it's literally in the past year in the UK that you don't really need too much of a reason, like grounds for divorce anymore. And it can happen as quickly as like a few weeks, like literally 6 weeks.
Do you think that's a good thing?
See, this is what is running through my head, because it's kind of like marriage is a huge commitment. And it's like, should it be that easy that you don't even explore an option to work on it? But then at the same time, every single situation is different. You might need to get out of there ASAP, like having discovered some sort of new information or being in a position of danger, harm, anything like that. Every situation is different.
When you said that marriage is a huge commitment, do you mean legally?
I think so. Yeah, I think I mean legally. But then you saying like people nowadays can show their commitment legally as well. Like I'm thinking about myself, right?
Right.
I'm
true.
I'm pretty committed to Joe, considering we have a child together and we've got a mortgage together,
Yeah.
which is
Both
very
financial,
binding.
legal things.
Yeah, very, very binding. So you kind of almost don't need that marriage part anymore. So maybe that makes you think even more like if you're getting into marriage, it's because you really want marriage. You don't need to be married these days. Like it's not a necessity. It's not frowned upon. I personally, maybe it's just me and my way of thinking, but I personally, it doesn't matter to me if someone's married or not.
No,
Like
absolutely not.
you can still be in a serious relationship but choose not to be married, and that's perfectly fine. And I feel like we're going in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, that was the
So,
example I was given. Like, my parents weren't married when I was born
mm,
until I was about 8, I think, or 9.
yeah,
So that was pretty normal to me. But even when you said, do you think that majority of people are happy in relationships? It made me think like about our parents. Like our parents are
mm,
still together, like as in my parents are still together, your parents are still together. But when I think
yeah,
about some of our friends or people I went to school with, I think I was kind of one of the rare ones because most people I knew, their parents were separated or divorced.
yeah. I think it was definitely the majority of people's parents had either like remarried
Yeah,
or in just new relationships. So it's yeah, really strange to think about how like times have changed. I'm just thinking of like the Queen's passing recently and like how there was so much drama around Charles remarrying and
right.
marrying someone who's even Harry and Meghan, like Meghan had been divorced
Mm,
and was remarrying,
hmm.
and there was like a big deal made out of like what color her wedding dress was because she's a divorcee or whatever. And you just
Right.
think, wow, like maybe people are just really archaic in their thinking.
I think
And
they definitely are. I think over the last year I realized how much so.
yeah,
Just with different things that have, happened and surfaced online. And you see the comments that people leave and stuff. I'm like, wow, that is a really backwards way of thinking.
yeah. And but then I guess marriage is a very
Old
old
traditional thing.
tradition.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I
yeah.
guess that's probably why they're
Adds
linked
up.
like that. But I thought we could speak a little bit about our relationship past if we're comfortable in doing so. We don't obviously not don't have to share all the ins and outs,
Hmm.
but what were our experiences like? Were they healthy? Were we happy? And how has that maybe shaped kind of where we are now?
Want me to go first?
Yeah, sure. If you're happy
Okay,
to.
so I think I've said this before. I don't really feel like I've had real relationships. Because they happened when I was a teenager. That was pretty much the last time I was in a relationship, or at least a young adult. My last relationship ended when I was 20. But the most recent relationship, I guess, so the one when I was 20, that relationship I was happy in. I think it was reasonably healthy as well, but I think I had tunnel vision. So in that relationship, I think I didn't think that there was any other options. In fact, I know that I thought that because I'd never once thought, oh, I could potentially be single again. Like I just assumed
Right.
this person I'll be with forever. And I think and I spoke about this in therapy. I think this comes from the fact that I've had my parents as an example, and that they're my parents. For anyone who doesn't know them or whatever, they're very much loved up, they're very happy, and I've only ever seen that as my well, in my head at the time, I think I only ever thought I'd seen that as an example, when in actuality there's so many different examples around me, of course.
Mm,
But because obviously it's my parents, I'm like, you know that's what I should be doing or whatever. So I
yeah.
think in my head I thought, well, if I'm with someone, I'm going to be with them forever like they are. And I remember my therapist saying, you thought you were meant to be with someone as a teenager forever when your parents weren't teens when they met. They were a lot older. And I
Mm,
remember that having quite an effect on my way of thinking, I guess. And then the way that everything sort of went down was that my boyfriend had sort of asked me, was I really happy, and did I see, or was I happy with the fact that I'd never really been single, because I went from a relationship to relationship.
mm.
And I hadn't once thought about it until he said that. And so then
He's kicking himself now.
I felt really bad when everything ended, because that was one of the things he just sort of said he felt.
Yeah, but he was thinking of you and your
Yeah, and
happiness.
I
So
could never be more thankful to him for making me think that, or
yeah.
questioning that, or making me question that, because as soon as he said that, it wasn't a case of even me being like, oh, I want to date other people, because I think
Yeah.
a history would show that I haven't dated other people really, but
Mm.
it literally made me want to find out who I was
Hmm.
without a guy, without any influence of a relationship. And I really craved that. And that's when that relationship started to deteriorate. And it was all on my end. Like, it was all my fault for that, because I was just like, oh, I could be by myself.
Yeah.
That would probably be better for me. And I was very dependent on that boyfriend, because I'd been in a sort of nasty sort of breakup before, and I was just awful anxiety and depression and all this sort of stuff. So he was someone who really like healed me and looked after me and stuff. And it was a really
Mm.
sweet relationship in that sense, and it was very loving. But I realized I wasn't in love with him. I was just I loved what comfort he gave me and what
Yeah.
safety he gave me. And I thought, no, I actually need to not have that in someone. I need to be able to try and make that for myself. And I think
Yeah.
maybe that's a big reason why I have been single for so long as well, because I don't think I've always been able to feel that safety within
Mm.
myself. And so I'm sort of like, no, I can't be with someone until I can feel that.
Right. So you don't want to ever get to that point again where someone's questioning you on whether you're actually happy, like without you realizing that yourself. You want to be able to be the one who's like totally self-aware and
Yeah.
being like, no, I can be dependent on myself. This person's just adding to me and adding to
Yes.
my happiness.
Yes. I want additions and embellishment and all that sort of stuff. I don't want full reliance on someone to make me happy, because
Yeah.
that kind of power really scares me, because I've been subject to it quite a few times in my life, and each time it's not turned out very well. However, I don't believe that that's the case for everyone. I just, for me, that is what would be healthy for me.
Hmm.
But I think some people actually, especially in our friend group, are very dependent on their partners. And I wouldn't judge them for a second. And I remember I've had conversations with girlfriends about this, and they've said to me, oh, isn't it a bit weird that I always need them? I said, no, because that's actually what makes you feel comfortable. So why would I want you to not feel comfortable, sort of thing? So I think
Mm.
each relationship is different. But for me, I need to know that I'm good by myself.
Right.
How about your past, Jess?
So I would say obviously by far this is the most serious relationship I've been in. Prior to that, similar to what you were saying that you had in therapy, that kind of template of my parents was very much in my head. And it wasn't even just my parents, it was in my family, a lot of people meeting their partners in university. And
Right, right,
so
right.
when I met my ex-boyfriend in my first year of university and we ended up going out throughout the whole of uni until just before graduation, I had it in my head kind of the same as you, like, yeah, we're going through some tough patches, whatever, but it's just a phase and this is meant to be. Like this is gonna happen because this is what's happened to everyone else
Right. Yep.
in my family. So this
Yep.
is my path as well.
Yep.
And I think a part of me also felt like if it doesn't work out like this, my family are all gonna be like, huh? Like what? Like,
Yeah. How
this
did
is
you
what
not
we
make that
do.
work? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which is obviously very crazy and not what anyone thought really in my family. Like everyone, I think everyone's like, you're young, like whatever. It's just the way it worked out for them.
Mm.
And it was extremely different for my parents. They had to show like real commitment because they were dating in different countries for
Right.
years.
Yeah.
And then they decided to kind of take the plunge and get married in order to be able to like, well, I think my mum got pregnant with me before they got married, but in order to like solidify, I don't know how to explain it, I
Like they
guess,
as a unit and be able to.
yeah, merge their lives
Yeah.
a bit more. And then my mum moved to the UK. But I don't know if I would say my past relationships prior to this one were healthy. I don't think they were because I remember how I felt and
Right.
how I never felt good enough and always compared myself and always felt insecure and couldn't fully be myself and couldn't question things. I didn't feel strong enough because I felt like if I'd said something that could jeopardize
Yeah.
what there was, like it felt fragile. And I think now I'm at a point in a happy, loving relationship where I know I can question things. I know I can be myself. I know I can say exactly how I'm feeling. And that's how I know that I'm happy.
I think as well, witnessing you in past relationships to how you are with Joe. I think I've said this before as well, that when you first got together, the way that you began that whole relationship was through being insanely open and honest. And then I think that sort of basically set your relationship to start off and continue like that.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, you didn't ever really have any what's the word? Any barriers as such in that sense anyway. You've had your own hurdles for different things. But I
Yeah.
think where previous relationships had problems that would have been actually huge to you are kind of insignificant problems to what you and Joe would have now, sort of thing. And I think that was again something that being with Joe, becoming a mother, you said like your perspective changed, and things that once bothered you before you wouldn't even think about, twice about now. And I
Yeah.
think that is such a good example from with your previous relationships, like things
Yeah.
that, like I always remember one of your breakups. That day wasn't a great day for you, obviously. But during the day, it was a bit of a roller coaster for you. And I remember the reason that had sort of spiraled you, it was something that to me, I didn't think twice about. It was just you were saying they weren't online or something on their phone. And to me, I was thinking, what is she talking about? But like, I was just shutting up and be like, okay, it'll be fine, sort of thing. But that really bothered you in that relationship. Like you were able to tell if someone like him being online or something clearly meant something to you, or like
I don't remember that. It's really interesting.
But
I mean,
now,
it's like thinking about that now, I can go the entire day without talking to Joe.
yeah,
I'm not think
see
twice
what I
about
mean?
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but it's like being in a relationship where you're constantly guessing if you're on that person's mind, or
Yeah,
if that person is even into you.
yeah.
It drains the hell out of you. And that's how I know that was not healthy. I was so much better being on my own. And I remember it being actually a perfect time to be single, because I was graduating, moving back home, got my first full-time job,
Single
like as a
Jess was a
graduate.
fucking force to be reckoned with, I
Oh
swear.
my God, I was going out all the time and just living my life. Like
Yeah,
I was just so happy. It was really good for me, I think.
I think
So
so.
I think this is a perfect way to get into the pros and cons of being single versus in a relationship. I wanted to ask you, do you think it is easier to get to know yourself and grow and develop as a person when you're single versus in a relationship? Like, is it impossible to do in a relationship, or do you think it's just easier when you're single?
For me, it's easier being single because when I was in a relationship, I wasn't working on myself. I wasn't learning much about myself. And I think that was through fear. Like, what if I really like doing this without my boyfriend? What if I actually really like not, being with him and stuff like that? I think personally, yes, it's a lot easier to self-discover. However, we have best friends who have been in 10-year relationships and they're well-rounded, they're self-aware. I think it's every person's different, but I would probably assume most people grow better alone first and then more so with someone.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier on your own if you were single, just because I think you don't have that element of like having to explain yourself to someone in any way.
Yeah.
Like you won't be able to offend anyone in
That
any
I think
way.
I think yeah, so I think not only the fear of like you realizing that things might be better or worse, whatever, but even trying to bring that up to someone that could be taken the wrong way. Like, why are
Yeah,
you thinking this? Am I not enough? Or all these sorts of things,
yeah.
right? So
Or
it
am I
might not
getting
even,
in the way?
yeah.
Like the partner questioning that. Yeah.
And it doesn't even have
But
to be that deep. It could be just something like wanting to go to do a class by yourself or something, and then them being like, "Oh, I'll come too." And it's like, wait, no, that was meant to be like for me, like a
yeah,
me thing.
yeah, that's interesting. So I think one of the most glaring perks that people might say of being in a relationship is sex whenever you want it.
Yes, I would assume.
Can we just say though, when we're talking about being in a relationship versus being single, we're talking about being in a healthy relationship where you're pretty happy. Yeah. Because I mean, you could be in a relationship with someone and be able to have sex whenever you want, but it could be pretty dull and you might actually want to go and have sex with other people.
Well, but then that is probably also a con then, isn't it? Of some people who are in relationships. I mean, I suppose, like you're saying, that it's clearly not the best relationship, but some people might see that about their relationships, like they've got a good relationship but just bad sex, but they're staying in that relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as in like all like there are other pros that are outweighing that con, but then it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
could be a big con.
Because I think that
Yeah,
that is probably quite a lot of people. Like, not
yeah,
necessarily
I
that they're
think
having bad sex, but they're not having like mind-blowing sex every day, you know?
yeah, which I think is normal
Yeah,
because it wouldn't be mind blowing if it was mind blowing all the time, right?
I guess not.
But I guess a perk of it as well is that you get to communicate and find out and experiment what you like with that person. If you're like having regular, constant sex with that person, you're kind of, and you're also, you've got that intimacy side that you're building as well because of all of the other elements of your relationship coming together. So that could be a perk of being in a relationship.
I'd probably counter argue it as well that some people, when they're single, they feel like they get to know what they like even more so when they're dating around and trying things out. I think the key word for me there was what you said was intimacy. That is probably more so what you get with a relationship as opposed to when you're single. So
Okay.
you might still be learning what you like. And I think what, at least in what I'm seeing online, I know that everyone else's algorithms are different, but I'm seeing a lot of pro speaking up about what you like, no matter
Hmm.
what sort of thing. So I'd like to think that single people are vocalizing what they want and what they like, experimenting in that way too. But I think the closeness and the intimacy comes from when you're in a relationship, or at least with a regular partner.
It's quite interesting you say that because it's making me think like, do you think single people are a bit more vocal because they're kind of they need to get to the point? Like, do you know what I mean?
Like
Like
we're
you've
in
got
this for
your
one night. Like
yeah,
let's do it
one
right.
night only. So I'm going to tell you exactly what I want right now. Let's do it. Do you
I
know what I
think,
mean? Do you think?
yeah, I think it's probably a mix. I think I know speaking personally, like I think I'm not always great at being vocal, and I think out of fear that it would happen again. However, I've got really close friends who are like, no, I'm telling, like literally for what we just said, they're like, no, I'm telling them what I want because if we're doing this, like you're gonna do it right, sort of thing. And I'm like, good for you. Like, know
Yeah,
your worth and demands. And I think that's something that I'm learning.
yeah.
Whereas I
I think
think,
it's really hard to do that.
yeah, because I think when you're in a relationship, at least from my experience, I felt more comfortable being vocal then
Right, yeah.
because it's like you're not going to get necessarily that kind of, I don't know, not necessarily rejection, but you know what I mean? Like you don't know what
Yeah, no
reaction
one's
you
gonna
would
be
get
like,
out of,
that's weird, I'm
yeah,
not doing that. And then next
right.
thing you know, you're on someone's group chat the next day.
Yeah,
Like,
she did what? So again, I think it's the type of person, and I think this is what goes hand in hand with both relationships and being single. It really does depend on the type of person you are, I think.
yeah, I agree. I think another thing, another potential perk that I was thinking of
Hmm.
was financial perks. And this could go either way because I was thinking, well, in the early days when you're dating, you could be going out on dates every week and you're like rinsing your money. Whereas in the longer term, if you were to decide to move in together, that could save your costs as well. What do you think?
I'm trying to
I
think
mean,
of,
you're single and you're at home, so I suppose you're not. You're like
yeah,
the
I'd be basic.
ideal of saving.
Yeah, I mean, I think any sort of experience or opinion I'm having isn't going to be the majority. So when you said financially, the first thing I thought of was how couples are able to afford places to live.
Okay, yeah, because you're splitting that cost with someone
Yeah,
else.
I cannot buy a house by myself yet. I cannot. Like, I've looked into it. I can't do it unless if I'm purchasing one of those tiny homes and gal wants land. So, you know, that definitely comes as a perk. I think from people in relationships, they're able to split costs, whether it's renting, whether it's buying, vacations. There's a lot of financial gain being in a couple or even like as a family. I mean, and I know that's probably a controversial thing because there's more people, but usually there are more things available as discounts for people as couples or families as opposed to single people. And when it comes to things like Christmas and birthdays,
Mm.
a single person will be spending way more than people who are in families and relationships because often it will be again that they're splitting the cost and it'll come from both of them or something, if that makes sense. Or if I think about the amount of people that I buy or would buy for and their families and stuff like that, it's way more than them just buying for one single person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get
So,
that.
so to me, it's definitely like the people who have more money always tend to be in relationships and families. However, they don't have the spare money to do the things that I would want to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Uh,
so are you thinking travel?
no, not necessarily travel, but say like for example, if I was like, "Oh, do you want to go out to dinner this week?" You would probably need a bit more warning, or you've got bills and stuff like that to pay, and I'm not
Yeah,
having to have those same financial responsibilities because I'm currently like renting at home, sort of thing. I'll pay my parents' rent, but that's
yeah,
not the same as paying a mortgage, stuff like that. So it's weird. It's like there's certain restrictions on both sides.
yeah, I agree. What do you think about the idea of a perk potentially of being in a relationship,
Mm.
being having someone literally on tap to be able to share experiences with, or like someone who's hopefully always down to be doing stuff with you, like going traveling and stuff like that?
I mean, sounds nice. It's not the most appealing thing to me because I think it's not always on my radar, if I'm being honest, like that thought. And I think more often than not, I'm still in that mindset of I wish it was my friends with me as opposed to some person I'm with romantically. I'm always like,
Right.
I wish like I could be doing this with my friends or family. I don't ever really. uh, this is why I'm single.
No,
I
but I
don't.
think you've trained yourself to think that way, and because you've been single for so long.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. So the idea of like thinking of a trip and being like going with a partner, I'm sort of like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess that could be a thing.
Yeah, but it's almost like not been on your radar for a while,
No.
so it wouldn't be your automatic thought like, oh, like when we're going on a trip later this year, I highly doubt you'll be there thinking, God, I'd love to spend this with a romantic partner. Like you're
Not
there
once.
for the
Like
girls
I am
trip.
literally there for the girls. Like and even when I look at like online when people post like their travel pictures and like couple pictures and stuff like that, I'm like, if that couple were out of the way, that would make such a good shot with all the girls. Stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, I completely get that being in a relationship has its perks and probably travel and things like that. But again, I think it's just because, like you said, it's been so long since I've been in a relationship. It's just not my trained way of thinking. But I
Yeah.
reckon I could be down for it.
Yeah. No, I think there are so many counter arguments. So like I
Mm,
love that everything I've said, you're like, well, I could counteract that with that because we've got different
yeah.
experiences.
And
Yeah.
I'm very happy being single, but I
Yeah.
also wonder how different I would feel about that. Like when people say, oh, a con of being single is being lonely. And I'm like, God, I never feel lonely. But I think that's because I live at home. I've always
Right.
I'm with family. And I remember my mum saying that when she first, bit of a weird story, but when she first dropped me off to nursery or something, and there was a parent teacher meeting or something like that, they said, oh, she doesn't really speak to many of the kids at the nursery. My mum got really upset and they went, no, 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 it's not a bad thing. She doesn't want to. She's quite happy. She'll talk about her family or she'll play by herself,
Oh,
sort of thing. It's like she doesn't really need anyone else. And I was just like, interesting. Now I think about that. I wonder if that's kind of the way like I've only got room for my family and friends at the moment, I guess. So
yeah.
I don't think about letting someone else in. But if I was living by myself, I wonder if I'd feel a lot more lonelier and actually crave more of
Hmm.
a romantic relationship or situation.
Yeah. But I still think even, I mean, I'm not with you when you're at home, but I feel like you still go and you find your own space. Like you still have your own time. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like you
Yeah,
are still very happy to be
I
on your
love
own.
myself in that way, which is really weird because I have a lot of mental health problems.
No, but I think that's
Like,
really good. Like, I mean, how annoying would it be like for anyone if you were just like, come on, let's hang out like all the time, like downstairs with your family. They're like, okay, just leave me alone.
yeah, I think I've got boundaries for myself. Like people say, you're an extrovert or an introvert. I'm neither. I'm an ambivert. I like my own space. I
Mm,
like my own time, but I also love having time with family and friends. So I'm kind of good with both. So I
yeah,
think it would be interesting to see how different I might feel about being single and alone and all this sort of stuff and remaining single and stuff when I move out.
yeah. Oh, so watch this space. Maybe there'll be a part two coming in a couple of years. No, but I find it really interesting. Do let us know what your thoughts are on being single versus in a relationship. If you're in a relationship and you want to be single, make sure your partner doesn't follow us and can't see your answer. um, but yeah, that leads me on to today's dedication. It's kind of a dedication to a person that I've kind of followed for a few years. Her name is Esther Perel, and she is a psychotherapist. I think she predominantly works with sort of relationships and couples and love and sex, basically. And I first found out about her a few years ago when I got into podcasts, and she did one called Where Should We Begin? And essentially, the premise of it is you're listening into someone's counseling session. So they're
Oh my God,
couples and you're
weird.
listening. It is so interesting. I absolutely loved listening to it because it's kind of they'd fill you in on the situation that why they'd come to therapy, and then I just think Esther has the most interesting viewpoints in the way she turns things on its head. I just find it so interesting. If that's something you're interested in, go and
Yeah.
follow her, go and listen to her. I think she's got another series out called How's Work, and again I think it's based on relationships and people who are so based around like careers as well. So go and give her a follow on Instagram, Esther Perel Official. She posts quite a lot of relationship quotes and advice and kind of viewpoints. If that's your cup of tea, it's really, really interesting. So yeah, that's Esther Perel Official. But yeah, thank you so much for listening this week. Let us know your thoughts and make sure to like, subscribe, comment. As always, we love to hear from you on all of our streaming platforms, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.